Hello everyone. So, all of our previous work has developed these three important theorems for us. That a angle is acute if and only if the side opposite to it squared is less than the other side squared. The angle C is right if and only if the hypotenuse squared is equal to the two legs squared. And the angle C of ABC is obtuse if and only if the side opposite to C squared is greater than the other two legs squared. And this if and only if is important to understand. If and only if is a fancy word that implies that basically if this is true, if angle C is obtuse, it implies that this is true. But if this is true, that AB squared is greater than AC squared plus BC squared, it's also implying that angle C must be obtuse. That's what the if and if means. In both directions, the theorem works. One implies the other. So, let's try to use this information to solve a problem. In triangle XYZ, we have that XY is 11, YZ is 14. For how many integer values of xz is triangle xyz acute? So we have some triangle x, y, and z. We know that xy is 11 and that yz is 14. And we want to make sure that this triangle is acute. Well, an acute triangle is implying that every angle has to be acute. So let's see, in order for angle y to be acute, then the side opposite to it, xz squared, must be strictly less than the other two sides squared. So 11 squared plus 14 squared. And simplifying this a little bit further, we have that xz squared is less than 121 plus, 14 squared is 140 plus 56, so 196. And that would simplify that xz squared is less than 196. 196. So that would imply that it's less than 317. Okay, but this is not the only situation we need to worry about. That's just for angle Y. What about angle Z? Because we need that to be acute as well. Well, then that implies that the side opposite to Z, so the 11 squared, would have to be less than 14 squared plus xz squared. This is in order to show that angle Z is acute. So, simplifying that, 121 is less than 196 plus xz squared. And if we subtract 196 on both sides, we are left with, we have 90 minus 20, which is negative 70, minus the 1, negative 75, is less than xz squared. Now we have one more situation we need to take care of. We need angle x to be acute as well, which means that the side opposite to x, the 14 squared, must be strictly less than 11 squared plus xz squared. And we have 196 is less than 121 plus xz squared, which implies that 75 is less than xz squared. Okay. Well, now let's consider all this information. So, if xz squared has to be greater than 75 squared, then it's almost certainly has to be greater than negative 75 squared. So we can kind of just outrule this together, because this condition automatically gets rid of this one. Or I shouldn't say get rid of it, automatically satisfies this one. So we don't really need to worry about that part. Now let's consider this part. Well, how can I use these two pieces of information together? Well, by taking the square root on both sides, we have that xz is less than, well, the square root of 317, well, that's about 17.8, somewhere around there. And the square root of 75 is somewhere less than 9, but greater than 8. And since we need it to be strictly less than integer values, let's combine this information together. So integer means whole number, basically. Whole number. So how many whole number values is this worth? Or how many whole values could xz possibly be worth? Well, xz has to be less than 17.8. So xz is about less than, well, this isn't a whole number, so we would just round to the nearest, or not the nearest whole number, but the next closest, or like closer to whole number, which is 17. Because if it goes beyond 17.8, then that means it would be greater than, and if it was like 18, it would be greater than the 17.8, and it would fail this condition here. Now, it also has to be greater than, I don't know, this is like 8 point something. So if it's 8 point something, it has to be greater than that. Well, this is after you square root it, right? And it has to be greater than that. Well, 8 point something isn't a whole number, so if x was 8, it would be less than the square root of 75, because 8 is the square root of 64. So that means that it has to be less than 9. We would have to round up in that case, because again, we want it to be greater than the square root of 75. And the only whole number greater than that would be 9, the square root of 81. So xz is all possible integers between 9 and 17, which means that, well, if we're asking how many integer values could it possibly be, this is implying that xz could have, well, what's the difference between 9 and 17? It could have 8 possible integer values, because it's all the numbers, well, including, in each case, including the 9 and the 17.